first off, talk about the importance of this treaty, the importance of this meeting tomorrow, and maybe what some of the friction points might be, if any.
Okay, let me just start by saying I hope we get a great turnout at this meeting at the Red Lion in Kalispell, downtown in the mall, 5:30 to 7 o'clock tomorrow night. I think it's very important as many Montanans, especially folks from Lincoln County, can get out as they can. The Columbia River Treaty was signed in 1964. Discussions started back in 49 because there was major flooding, terrible flooding. And it was to harness the Columbia by holding the snowpack back near the mountains, releasing it on a regular interval so that power could be generated all year long in dam after dam after dam down the Columbia. Canada would benefit with half of the additional power created from their stored water. And they have received up to as much as 250 to 300 million a year. And I don't argue that because I know what it feels like to have my valley flooded. I know the Kootenai Valley. Libby Dam was the fourth dam built under the treaty. Libby Dam holds back Lake Kootenai, an international beautiful lake that you drove along on your way from Libby to Eureka. Now, that was created as part of that treaty. Very few people think that there's really much connection, much Montana connection, much importance. Remember, I said the Canadians get $250 to $300 million for holding back 80% of the water by flooding their valleys. We flooded our valley in Lincoln County, and we get zip. We have never received any annual compensation of any sort. And they were saying to me, well, what would you want? Finally, I said, look, for all the same reasons you compensate Canada, you should compensate Montana and compensate them in the same way. So if for 80% of the water, they're getting $300 million. I'm just saying 20% of it, of $300 million is $60 million. Pay Montana that money every year.
And tell us again who they're getting that money from, who Canada is getting that money from?
That comes from the revenues generated by the stored water. They hold the water back, flood their valley. As it gets to a dam, it goes through that dam and creates electricity. If they didn't hold the water back, zingo, by the end of June, that water's in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
So they're compensated for storing the water as it goes through the dam. It comes from the revenues. Canada actually, I believe, gets half of the electricity from the stored water. So it's the revenue stored by their part, and Montana should be compensated in the same way.
Seems to make sense. Why wasn't that done from the start? I mean, it almost sounds like, Go ahead.
That's a really good question. The folks, and I'm a native there. I've grown up. I fished and worked and played and worked in a sawmill right along the Kootenai River at Rexford. Well, people automatically assumed that there would be cheaper power in the same vein that Hungry Horse. And that's why the aluminum plant was located at Columbia Falls. That had been commonplace prior to Libby Dam construction. Somehow, I don't know how, but the dam was almost built before local people began realizing that. And I know that because I was editor of the Western News by that time. I took photographs of Gerald Ford walking across the top of Libby Dam with Mike Mansfield and Tom Judge. So nobody knows why it wasn't, but that's only one part of it, Aaron. Another really huge factor is in the 1964 treaty, not everybody in Canada was thrilled about this Columbia River Treaty. Many of their political folks had a different plan. There was some real strife up there, but when the treaty was finally signed in 1964, Article 12 calls for Libby Dam. Article 13 talks about a diversion, a water diversion. So at Canal Flats, 100 miles north of Eureka, where the Kootenai comes down and it flows very near Columbia Lake, the headwater of the Columbia. They have the right to divert 1.5 million acre feet on an annual basis from the Kootenai to the Columbia at that point. There is an old steamboat canal, actually 150 years ago. Steamboats ran all the way up to Golden, B.C. On same steamboat that my grandmother, she was the first woman to ride up the Kootenai from Libby to Eureka on a steamboat. And that was in the late 1880s, the 1890s.
Wow, you don't hear about that much. You hear about the steamboats going up the Missouri, and of course,
yeah. Well, they
General Marr falling off a steamboat. That's apparently how he met his demise.
Fort Benton. That's a Fort Benton, the innermost port. But what they did, they would come by train from Spokane to Libby, then get on the steamboat at Jennings near Libby, and go all the way up to Kootenai. But the big thing is they can divert. They have the right to divert. They have not exercised that right. But in the 64 treaty, they could take, and 1.5 million acre feet is 26% of the Kootenai River flow. Now, Aaron, I want to ask you this. Where in the hell are the environmentalists? That would be devastating to the Kootenai River, the aquatic life of the Kootenai River, Lake Kootenai, and the Columbia River. You don't hear any environmentalists clamoring to say, hey, that kind of a diversion of water would be terrible. So anyway, we're stepping up and saying it. We've been saying it since the consideration started 8 years ago.
So if you're able to make the changes that you would like to make, and kind of make some changes to this Canadian entitlement, you're saying, hey, they're going to hold, when it comes to electricity value, they're going to whole pile of money. What would be the net impact to Montanans, especially if those in northwestern Montana, if you're able to make the changes? Are we talking lower power rates? Are we talking more money coming into the state, or just better business practices?
Specifically, number one, we'd like to get rid of that proposed diversion. That's simple, doesn't cost anything. Just remove the words from the treaty. As far as impact to Montana, there would be a check coming to Montana. And in 2015, I set up a state special revenue account. Any compensation from through Libby Dam, Columbia River Treaty would go into that state special account. And then there was a method of distribution set up for those funds.
Interesting. So kind of like a coal tax trust fund, but in a way, but we're leveraging the electricity savings, similar like that kind of, I guess?
There would be whatever check came in. It would go into that fund with a portion going to the general fund, the Montana General Fund, any considerable portion being returned to Lincoln County, which has become a welfare county. We formerly had the highest per capita income, but because of federal land managed decisions, loss of very, very, very productive land under Lake Kootenai. That's the biggest clear cut in Montana, Aaron.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
not a stem grows under there.
I've heard it described, and I think Congressman Greg Gianforte heard it described, and he shares this often. It's poverty with a view, because it's such beautiful country, and you're surrounded by resources, but yet folks are living in poverty. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. State Senator Mike Cuff out of Eureka, great to have you as always. Give us the details again on that meeting for those tuning in to KJJR out of the Flathead who can try to, or elsewhere who want to travel for that meeting.
Yes, sir. The meeting, Columbia River Treaty negotiating team holding a town hall meeting at the Red Lion in downtown Kalispell, 5 o'clock to 7:30 tomorrow night, Wednesday night. 5 o'clock to 7:30, Red Lion in Kalispell.